Okay, so here we are working on a 2012 Ranger again. As I was working on another project, I noticed that the boot on the steering rack on the tie rod coming out of the steering rack is completely split and worthless. You can see that guy is cut into two pieces on the left-hand side coming out of the steering rack right there in the center of the frame. And so I bought a pair of them, and I'm going to get this thing opened up and get those replaced. So step one, loosen your lug nuts. Step two, jack it up off the ground. Step three, take your tire off, and then we're going to loosen this tie rod nut right here. He's got a cotter pin underneath the bottom of him, so he's going to come off, and then we'll slip that boot off. Looks like there's some fancy clips on it, and get it replaced. So here we go. Okay, so the tie rod bolt is loose. On my machine, that was a 14 millimeter head on the bolt, and it was a 17 millimeter to go over the jam nut. You obviously have to get the cotter pin out first, and then there's a washer that goes on the bottom. Now, one thing that's important here, your alignment is set by where the tie rod and where this attachment is on the end of your tie rod shaft. So what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to use the two wrench method here. You're going to want to keep this jam nut right where he is, the back nut, the one closest to the center of the machine. Maybe even make a Sharpie mark on there so you know you haven't turned him. And then you're going to break this guy off. And somehow you're going to want to count the number of turns, or somehow I got to look at the new piece. I haven't unboxed the new boots yet. But that nut probably has to come off in order to slip the new boot in there. Somehow we have to make a record to know that we've got him back in the same place so that we maintained our alignment. So I'm going to figure that out here in a second, and I'll be back in a minute. Okay, so a couple things to keep in mind here. This is the driver's side now. The driver's side is left-handed thread, so you're actually going to go clockwise to spin it off. So I made my Sharpie mark on the shaft and on the nut, and then I counted 19 turns until the nut fell off. So, and you do have to immobilize that shaft. You can see I've got a pair of vice grips on there. For my hardware, that was, I used a 3/4 inch wrench on both the back end, the flats on the back end of the tie rod end, as well as the jam nut that goes on there. It might be a 19 millimeter, but 19 millimeter and 3/4 are really close together. So anyway, I'm going to pull that vice grip off and then start working on the clips to get the old boot off there and see what happens here. Okay, so on the outside, the side closest to the wheel, they use these kind of clips. I'm not much of a fan of them because they're a pain in the butt to get off, but I think you can pretty quickly see why they use them at the factory, because those internal jaws, that little clip, just put them on one pair of pliers and they go together real quick. There's no trimming, there's no extra steps involved there. I'm sure they get installed pretty quick, but they're kind of a pain in the butt to take off. Basically, I just took a pair of needle nose pliers and I squeezed from the outside, and then you need a small flat blade screwdriver and sort of jam in the teeth and split them open and then just pull them off. So he's off there, and now I got to go in there and get it off at the other end. Okay, so there's the old boot. It wasn't too bad to get off, but you can see that it split. What's shown on the left side of the view right now is the side that goes towards the center of the steering rack, towards the center of the machine. And I just gave that a good tug, and the boot sort of inverted itself and it flipped over. And then when I kept pulling to try to slide it off, it split in half, as you can see there by the piece that's on the right side. The piece that's on the right side was actually closest to the wheel, and it sort of came inside out. That fits pretty tightly on that shaft. And as you can see up here, it's pretty dirty and nasty along that shaft, so we're going to take some WD-40 and a clean rag, and we're going to clean that up, because we got to remember that as I slide the new boot over there, anything that's on that shaft, we're going to be pushing it right towards the center of there. So we're going to get that guy cleaned up, and then we'll take a look at the new boot here. Okay, so here is the receipt from Quad Logic. You can see their part number there is 100-2140-D. Ranger steering rack boots for the pair. At this time, this is spring 2025. There was 21. It was $21.95 for the pair. The boxes do not do much of a job telling you which side is driver's side and which side is left side. So I've just laid them out to see here. And you can see that there's sort of a bulge on one side where there's a larger diameter towards the steering rack side, and the other is a fairly uniform diameter, towards the back end. And then if we look on the machine, the one that's laying on the floor right now is a constant diameter, and you can see that that split is on the passenger side, so apparently that's how they're going to go, so that's how we're going to put them back on. We got this shaft wiped down and cleaned up over there, so I'm going to get to it. They give you a couple of zip ties in the kit here, a big one and a little one. I would surely think that the big one would go towards the center side, and the little one probably around the outside, which that's way longer than it needs to be, but always cut it off. Okay, well, that's it. She's on there. I have a hard time getting it to pull focus here, but what I would say is that it helped a little bit to spray a little bit of WD-40. The small end of the boot, that would be the wheel side of the boot, is pretty tight on the shaft. So I sprayed a little bit of WD-40 down inside that diameter. And then as you're getting it started on the end, over the threaded end where the tie rod goes, I did find it helpful to hold onto the shaft and then rotate the boot so you're almost like threading it down the axis. And then once you get past the threads, it just goes right up, and you just got to get it aligned and get your zip ties on, and it's no big deal. So start putting stuff back together, and then we'll move to the other side. Okay, so you can just barely see if I can get the light and the focus in the same place at the same time. My mark is still on the shaft, and my mark is still on this nut. So I'm going to spin this. For me, it was 19 turns. So I'm going to spin this nut back onto that shaft 19 times, and then I'm going to line up the marks, and I'm going to keep that where it is when I put the tie rod nut, or when I put the tie rod end back on, and jam those two together. And that way I know my alignment on this side is the same place it was when I took it off. Okay, so there we are. The tie rod end is back on, and we'll just have to get things lined back up. You can see my mark is still reasonable in alignment. I counted my 19 turns back, then I jammed the tie rod end onto the jam nut without moving the jam nut. Now we just put the bolt back through to tie it back onto the strut housing, and we'll be ready to put the tire back on this side, move back to the other. Okay, so the passenger side one is on here. Try to get this line out of the way. You can see it there that it does have the little bulge in it towards the back, or towards the steering rack side. The threads on that side tie rod are also left hand, so both sides have left-handed threads on them. The sockets and all the tools are the same size from one side to the other. But for whatever reason, they just apparently felt the need to change the diameter at the bottom of the one side. So it seems like that's the only difference between the two. So I'm going to get these zip ties clipped off and put Humpty Dumpty back together here, and that'll be that. You're done. This took me probably, I don't know, if you were really humming and you had this video to go along with and knew what tools you needed, you could probably do it in 45 minutes per side, maybe even a half hour if you're real good at this kind of thing. But I was taking my time, feeling things out for the first time. So, give yourself an hour and a half. You'll be all right. Good luck.